Greetings and welcome to What is Your Conflict Resolution Style? My name is Rachel Nemhauser. I'm the Director of Information and Family Support at the ARC of King County, and I am so excited to be here today. I'm here with my colleague, Ramona. Ramona, do you want to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about what we're doing here today?
Sure. Can you go to the next slide? Because it'll prompt me with my talking points. But
Yeah.
My name is Ramona Hattendorf. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Civic Engagement at the ARC of King County. And we'll say a little bit more about the ARC is about. But this class is part of actually 3 different series of classes that we're doing for something called the Inclusionary Practices Technical Assistance Network, which is quite a mouthful. But this is our state office of the Public Instruction, so OSBI. They got funding from the state legislature to compile a lot of resources and tools to implement inclusive practices. And most of them have been directed towards staff. And we were really thrilled this year to be able to do some series that were, yes, directed at staff, but also really tailored for families to help families to be able to participate. So this is part of our Navigating School series. And the different partners are statewide partners, and one of them is called the Family Engagement Collaborative, and we're part of that. And that also includes PAVE, it includes Education Northwest, and it includes a group called Roots of Inclusion. I always stumble whether it's Roots for or Roots of Inclusion, but in any case, welcome. We're really glad you're here. And we're in the process of getting everything up on the website. So eventually all of these classes, you can just go visit our website and click on any of them. We'll have a whole library for you.
Is this you, Ramona, or do you want me to take this slide?
You go ahead and take this one.
Right. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the ARC of King County before we jump in and start with the content. We are a nonprofit. We are currently located in Renton, although we're moving to the SeaTac Angle Lake area this summer, which we're so excited about. We are part of a larger network. There's the ARC of the United States, the ARC of Washington, or the ARC of King County. We promote and protect the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities so we can all live, learn, work, and play in the community. The ARC is driven by the fundamental belief that everyone deserves to write their own life story. And that means real access to education, meaningful employment, quality healthcare, and genuine community connections. At our chapter, we offer information and referral services, family support, systems navigation, and civic engagement support, among many other things. We help or refer on any topic related to intellectual and developmental disability. The most common things we talk about are special education, housing, and Medicaid long-term support, just to name a few. And like I said, I'm Rachel. I'm the Director of Information and Family Support. I've been here at the ARC for about 10 years, and I'm also the parent of a 20-year-old son who's been on an IEP since he was 3 years old. I am here to share about your conflict style and working with the IEP team. Before we get started, I want to stop sharing for a minute and see whether people would be willing to take the poll that Ramona just shared. We like to get a sense of who's here in the room with us today. If you're driving and it's not safe, please don't complete the poll. It's okay. But if you aren't driving and it is safe, please take a second. Tell us who you are. You're also welcome to put it in the chat if that would be easier. Well, it looks like we have a couple parents, and I know most of the people here, so yeah, all right. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Hang on. I'm like the least tech savvy when I'm trying to talk at the same time. Every tech skill goes out the window. Okay. There you go. Are you guys able to see before I jump in? Okay. So here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And I want to say we have a small group. I really would welcome your participation, your thoughts or ideas or feedback as we're going through your personal experiences. Obviously, we can't dive into like issues with your IEP team in this meeting, but still would really love you to feel like you could jump in anytime. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your relationship with your child's IEP team. We're going to talk about identifying your style of responding to conflict, recognizing the real need when working with the team, figuring out the issues that you want to prioritize, communicating with the school, working with interpreters, and then really hopefully time for questions and discussion at the end. So I would like to start with this question. How would you describe, and feel free to like raise your hand or even just call out if you need to, or answer in the chat. How would you describe your ideal relationship with your child's IEP team, and how successful have you been at that? But mainly I want to know what words would you use to describe the ideal relationship with your IEP team? And it's okay. If nobody answers, I'm just going to start giving my own answers, which is fine too. But if you have some feedback, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
This is Cheryl Lynn.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that my primary relationship would be that they are knowledgeable and are guiding me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got an older kid, or a young man, so it feels a little frustrating sometimes that they don't have information that we need.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I saw, Mano, you put collaboration in the chat. So what an ideal relationship from what you two are saying. Mano, you're saying collaborative, and Sherilyn, you're saying that there'd be some expertise and leadership in the room. Courtney says, ideal is when they listen and are creative and excited to make solutions and try new things. I love that. Like the listening piece, for sure, like a IEP team that isn't just steamrolling you, but really wants to listen to each other and listen to you. And I'd also say be excited to try new things, like some enthusiasm is amazing. I haven't heard that answer before. I've given this presentation several times and I haven't heard that answer, and I really like that. It's true too. You could feel it in the room when the staff is excited versus when they're not. Anything else? I want the IEP team to feel the relationship to feel balanced. Like I want to, and I think this is what you were getting at, Sherilyn. I want the group to be like I want to hold them in high esteem, and I want them to hold me in high esteem too. Like I want to be able to trust their expertise, and I want them to be willing to trust my expertise. So I guess one of the things I'd want in an IEP team is trust, like a trusting relationship, a safe space where I could share my concerns without there being, it being met with defensiveness or aggression or punishment of some kind. Okay, so then here's the next question. What barriers are interfering with your ability to have the type of relationship with the team that you strive for?
This is Cheryl Lynn.
Yeah.
I think it's the world of low expectations and resources.
Yeah. Okay. So low expectations, would you put that under the umbrella of ableism to some, like, is that sort of what you're getting at? Like,
yes, I was
underestimating the capability of a disabled person.
Yeah, I was opting to go with one that kind of fits better because I just don't know sometimes if like a team, I mean, it sounds sad, but if the team understands ableism, truly
right.
understands it.
Yeah,
it's hard.
That's
It's
right. Would they even recognize that in themselves?
Right.
Yeah. That's a good point. Courtney says in the chat when they want to label my kid or closed-mindedness or when they're done trying new things. Yep, to all of those things. I'll add a couple others. I think a lack of time. I don't have any proof of this, but I've been in the IEP game now for 17 years, and I feel like the meetings have gotten shorter. Like they used to schedule them for an hour and a half, and now it seems to be 30 to 45 minutes. And I don't think that's nearly enough time to have the quality conversations that I want, the collaborative, trusting, open, safe conversations that I want, because the time, I can't remember the last IEP meeting I went at where every couple minutes somebody didn't say, well, in the interest of time, I think we need to move on, which means that you're not ever actually like really diving into a topic. Ben says, I think it should be about the kid taking over responsibility for their own IEP as soon as possible, advocating for yourself. I think that's for themselves. I think that's a great point. So would you say a barrier that interferes is that the student with the disability is not being included and not leading or taking responsibility over that process? Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, right. Okay, Courtney, that's a good point. I mean, I could start demanding meetings all day long, anytime I want. That's true. That's not really the type of relation. I know you were joking, but I mean, that's also not what I want to have to do. But I'll add another barrier that this has not been my personal experience, but I've heard this and I know this is real. Language, first of all, huge barrier. First, I mean, just understanding the vocabulary of special ed, but I was more thinking about language, like when English isn't your first language. Non-English speaking parents want the same level of collaboration and trust and problem solving and enthusiasm around their kids, but they aren't speaking the same language as most of the people around the table. And I would also put race and gender and other marginalizing identities that I think can really show up at an IEP meeting. I've noticed many times when I'm at IEP meetings that most of the people around the table shares several overlapping identities with me. They tend to be within 10 years of my age. They tend to be women, and they tend to be American and English speaking, or at least, I mean, I'm making some assumptions there, I guess. But that seems, I feel like I'm sitting at a table with people who maybe share my experiences and share my worldview in a way that not everyone is able to. And I know that that's a barrier that interferes with many people's ability to have the type of relationship they want. I would also say special ed knowledge, like understanding how the system works, understanding how special ed works, how to communicate with the team, what your rights are, all of those things. Not knowing that stuff really would interfere with my ability, and did for many years, to have the type of relationship I want. Anything else about either of these questions before I move on? I'm going to shut my door because chaos is breaking out outside.
This is Ramona. I think I would also just add just a sense sometimes, like if you don't really feel like you're prepared, like maybe you haven't really had time to really think through and absorb that IEP, you're rushing in from work and work ran late, or just any kind, some of us we just don't feel as equipped to really be present in the moment. And that can be a real barrier. Some of us have our own disabilities, so that can be a barrier.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Ramona. That's true.
And some people they struggle in a group setting. I mean, some people are much more quiet and reflect. So I just think your own personal, whatever's going on in your life,
that's right,
can also, it's going to affect the way you're going to be present in that team, and that can create some barriers. And the same thing with some team members. I mean, like, who knows what their work days have been like?
That's right.
They just had to walk out of.
Yeah, it's a good point. I want to say, as a person who has gone to 17 years of my own son's IEP meetings and has also attended maybe 20 or 30 other IEP meetings that are not my kids, the difference when you're there for your own child versus when you're there as a professional is so notable, so noteworthy, that it really highlights your point. Like, we bring so much of ourselves into that room when it's our kid, especially like the emotions it brings up, the PTSD, or, you know, the trigger of our own past experiences with school, with authority, with professionals, with it. There's a lot that we carry in there. And it's amazing when I'm in a meeting when it's not my kid, it feels much lighter in general. Okay, let's move on. I like to just start this presentation with that conversation because I think a lot of us I think people often aren't spending time thinking about, what do I want this relationship to be? A lot of people will say, oh, I hate it. I hate the IEP meetings. I hate working with the team, but they maybe don't have a clearer sense of what they wish it would be like, you know, what they're striving for. So we're going to start by talking about 5 styles of conflict resolution, or of responding to conflict. And you'll see that they kind of go on these 2 axes. So they move from unassertive to assertive, and uncooperative to cooperative, if that makes sense. Okay, these are the 5, and we're going to dive into them with in more detail, but they're, as you can see, how they fall on those axes. Like competing and directing is more assertive and more uncooperative, and harmonizing, accommodating is considered more cooperative and less assertive, if that makes sense. Okay. Please jump in if I'm like talking gibberish and that makes no sense what I'm saying. Let's talk first about avoiding. A person with this conflict style may sidestep an issue, postpone an issue until a better time, or just withdraw. Like, they would rather do just about anything to avoid a conflict, to avoid a negative or a difficult conversation. They would rather remove themselves physically or mentally than undergo the tension or frustration of a conflict. And this is considered to be an uncooperative and unassertive style of conflict. So here's my question. Curious if there's anyone in the room who this feels familiar to. If you'd rather identify yourself privately, you can send me a private message and I won't share. But if you have anything you want to say for me to share without your name attached, I'm happy to do that.
So this is Ramona.
Yeah.
And this isn't necessarily specific to an IEP situation, but I find my response varies depending on my relationship. And there are definitely some relationships where I go into avoidance, which is funny because my job normally is to be assertive and cooperative. And I think in a lot of times I can be that, but when some things just kind of hit my trigger points, or I don't know what it is, but there's a certain vulnerability I feel, I definitely go into avoiding, denial.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, for sharing that. Anyone else?
This is Cheryl Lynn.
Yeah.
Ramona, you said exactly. You phrased what I was trying to come up with. So thank you.
I definitely see myself in this, and I actually see that I'm better at it in my professional life than I am in my personal life. I can have a difficult conversation in the context of my job, but like trying to do that with my parents or something becomes a much more difficult to do. Any other thoughts about avoiding? What do you think this would look like in an IEP setting? I would think that it would look like a parent being upset about something, but wanting to avoid the conflict. And so they don't bring it up and they don't talk about it. Or I suppose it could be anyone I'm just saying the parent, but bringing Ben's point, it could be that the person with the disability is avoiding the conflict, and it could be that the professionals in the room are avoiding the conflict. This is not a parent only problem. But in an IEP setting, the risk of avoiding is that, yeah, exactly, getting angry. And I think eventually, how long could you avoid for? That's like the pitfall. And Ben says also just wanting to leave, right? Like this even says the person would rather remove themselves physically than engage in the conversation. I don't see how progress can be made in that regard. Like you sort of, I would think, end up stuck in a situation that you're not happy with.
This is Cheryl Lanning.
Yeah.
Where where does crying in the IEP meeting come up? Where does
Good
that
question.
fall?
Well, let's get through all of them and then you tell me. We can decide together. It's not a quiz or anything like that. But I think it's a good question. And I'll tell you, Sherilyn, when I teach about IEPs, and one of the last slides is like encouraging families to think about, I talk to parents about their behavior in an IEP meeting. And I will always say, I have no problems with crying. Like if you're upset, you should cry. Like it's okay. People cry in IEP meetings all the time. I've seen it. I've done it. It happens. It's the losing control of yourself that I really encourage people not to do with their anger or their grief, or, if you're at the point where you're losing control, that's the time to end the meeting. But a little bit of crying is just real life. But that doesn't answer your question of where it fits into this style. So we'll come back to that. Okay, let's look at the next one. Competing and directing. So this is considered more assertive, but no more cooperative than it's still considered uncooperative. It puts the individual's interest above all others. It's power oriented, in which one is using their power to win. Now, I have been at many IEP meetings that it's about who's going to win. And you can see that, and they have lost sight of the person with the disability, the person we're there about. Conflict is viewed in terms of winning and losing. In IEP teams, the school administrator or special ed administrator often can take this role, but that is not always. I have absolutely seen parents take that role. I don't necessarily, sometimes I think we take the role we have no choice but to take. So it's not like always a judgment, but I've absolutely seen parents go in there in a directing role. I'll tell you the story. My husband and I advocated together, and he works in tech, and he was a director, and that is the way he works in his work. So he sat in an IEP meeting with me and tried to do that to the teachers, tried to boss everybody around and tell them how it was going to be, and it failed. It didn't land. So I mean, I've seen it on both sides. So who does this sound familiar to anyone? Has anyone experienced this personally, or has seen it from other people at an IEP meeting? Yeah. I often have to tell parents, because I've heard parents say this, I am the most important person at this meeting, or I'm the lead at this meeting, or things like that. And I really have sometimes had to tell parents that you aren't. Like, we're all equal members of that meeting or of that team. And that could be a hard one for some parents, and also for some special ed directors. Okay, let's go on. Next one. Oh, Ramona, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna flag, there's a couple comments. One
Oh,
was,
thank you for flagging that. It's not
Yeah.
showing up in my chat. Oh, let's see. When teachers in the IEP meeting tell you they're uncomfortable with various disabilities, well, yeah. Ben, I missed when you put that up there. Can you tell me the context of when you said that? Because I'm really curious.
Oh, well, it wasn't me. It was just several when I had IEPs and stuff. It just happened to me a lot. A lot of teachers in high school are like, well, I don't know much about these disabilities or these mental health concerns, and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Well, that's fine. They can say it, but doesn't hurt any less.
That's true. I mean, it hurts me to personally to hear them say that, but I know what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
ultimately, we're still here, whether they feel that way or not. Courtney, you
Yeah.
said this might be a common feeling with parents who have the preconceived idea that it is school versus parents. I think that's a really great point. I get calls from kindergarten parents like, I'm about to have my first IEP meeting. Do I need to bring a lawyer? If you spend any time in any Facebook groups for parents of kids who are on IEPs, you know the stories that people are hearing. And yeah, I think you're right that parents come in on the defense or on the offense because of that. And Ben, thank you. The parent is not the most important. The child is. Everybody else comes second but equal. I'm going to start changing what I say because I always say everybody is equal, but you're right. The child is the most important. And I think it gets lost when egos get involved. We know that. That's not a surprise to hear, but it bears reminding. Okay, harmonizing and accommodating. So this is more cooperative, but unassertive. The person using this style neglects their own needs and concerns to satisfy those of others. This person will often withdraw from conflict or give in so the other side can win. This can be a useful strategy if one's main priority is maintaining the relationship. And, that does bring me back to the first slide where we talked about the relationship. And I think a lot of us feel it's important. So I don't want to dismiss that this can be a useful strategy when you're maintaining or building a relationship. However, as often happens, we might be accommodating, but we're secretly keeping track of how accommodating we're being so that eventually we might get frustrated to not have that accommodation and flexibility reciprocated towards us. And that's when you might see someone snap. Or, like they're going and they're fine and then blah, the big feelings come out. As a person who really hates to sit in a room where there's tension and where there's like difficult conversation happening around me, I can see myself doing this harmonizing, like, yeah, whatever you guys think is best, because I just don't want to, cause any trouble. And I want to make it easier for everybody. Anyone else have personal experience with this? Can anyone think of a time where this could be helpful? When this could be a helpful strategy?
This is Sherilyn, not necessarily that when it's helpful, but in the early days, I was kind of like assuming that they were doing the best.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
You get a little bit angry when you realize they're not, whether they're not, for all the different reasons why they may not be doing the best by your kid.
Right. That's usually a pretty heartbreaking moment for a parent. I've seen it many times where unlike the parents who come in with their guard up, the opposite is parents that come in with a lot of trust and a lot of like assuming best intentions, which is beautiful, but then something goes wrong and it could feel like such a betrayal is what it ends up looking like or feeling like to families. And then they feel like they have to reassess their entire style of how they've been handling this because what they were doing before, they managed to let something slip by.
So
Any
this
other?
is
Yeah, go ahead, Ramona.
Ramona. Yeah. So something that came to my mind is that sometimes I think that's for an IP, but and other types of sort of like negotiations or something like that. There's some initial agreement, and maybe you didn't always have an agreement, but you've gotten to the place where there's some sort of agreement. You've gotten to the place where, you are trying some new things. And so it could just be that really wanted to nurture that relationship. So it's not necessarily like you're stepping back from being assertive about the overall end result, but it could be like at that stage that is very important to sort of maintain and nurture that relationship. Or maybe they pulled something else off earlier that, honestly, they somebody in the team really did a heavy lift on, and, you know, you just want to make sure that they know that you value that, you know, because it's a long haul. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not
I
always
like-
just one thing. It's sometimes multiple things, sometimes, but you got to keep your eye on the prize.
That's right.
And
That's right. And sometimes
sometimes-
you do have to value relationship over the
Mhm.
details.
Yeah, it can be a
Yeah,
dance.
I mean, I think part of what I think about when you say that is like, there's a difference between harmonizing or accommodating with intention versus like out of fear or out of like anxiety or other things. Like if you're harmonizing because you've decided at this moment, I prefer, and I think it's more important to value the relationship, and build trust, and I'll advocate another day. I think that's great versus I am really upset about this, but just in the interest of like my own discomfort, I'm gonna not say anything. That's where I feel badly for people and worry for them.
Yeah, and also sometimes it can be a sort of behavior response. I mean, some people, they just, when they're faced with conflict, they kind of, sometimes they call it fawn mode. Some
Right,
people
the
will just sort of,
fight, flight, or fawn. Yeah,
yeah. So that's not, it's different from what I said earlier, but that's another instance where you might
that's
see
true.
it, is it's not,
Mhm.
yeah, that's
That's
just,
true.
it's the
Yeah.
response based on what they're feeling and processing at the moment.
Like you're nervous, you might respond one way. Your nervous system is good. My nervous system frequently has a mind of its own.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's turn to
Oh,
compromising.
this is Cheryl Lynn.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to, I don't know whether it's ask or comment, but sometimes that sense of when you're, you know, you're smiling and you're playing nice, but you're really kind of thinking evil thoughts, and it feels awkward being like, I'll be nice to you in this moment, or I'm kind of preserving the relationship, but I don't know it, but I don't like you, or
Yeah,
that's kind of a tough position to hold.
it is. And it's a tough one to hold like long term. Like I could sit and hold my tongue for a meeting, but can I like do that for in perpetuity? I don't know. And Ben made the comment, I have a problem with trying to be assertive without making it seem like I'm being an ass. Need to work on that one. That is a problem for me too, Ben. I always joke that it's the New Yorker in me because that's where I'm from originally, but like I have this side of me that if I get angry and if I get like hurt and upset, you don't see the nicest side of me, and it is hard for me to be assertive without letting that come out. I hear you. I hear you. And that's something, I mean, I'm glad I know that about myself, because these people don't deserve abuse under any circumstances, and they don't deserve the meanness from me or the sarcasm or some of the things that come out. So like I want to know that I want to control myself, and it's really important to me that I am not unkind, you know, and disrespectful under almost any circumstance. Okay, let's talk about the next one. This one's right in the middle, compromising. So this is like right on the middle of the scale of cooperativeness and the scale of assertiveness. It's essentially splitting the difference or making trade-offs to find a middle ground. The person using this style looks for mutually acceptable solutions that partially satisfy each party. So you can think of like the parent wants 45 minutes of speech therapy, the school wants 20 minutes of speech therapy, and they settle on 30. That would be a compromise. That's not necessarily talking about what is the appropriate amount for this person and his learning needs, but it's just sort of splitting the difference. It can sometimes be a quick solution that avoids a deeper issue and sidesteps the true conflict. So yes, compromising can help us resolve a difference of opinion or a conflict, but it doesn't mean we're getting at the best solution. And it also can often get in the way of us having that deep conversation that IEP teams should be having. And Ben says, I don't get mean, I just explode and take it out of myself. Okay, that's another thing that happens. I thank you for sharing that, because you're right. Nobody at the IEP deserves the anger. I know. Once in a while, though, they really make me mad, but I try very hard. And what I did at the last IEP meeting where they made me really mad is I went and wrote a letter to the editor in the Seattle Times, and they published it. And it was very gratifying because I didn't name anyone's name, but I did put the quotes of the ridiculous things they said to me right there in there for them to read and identify themselves. It felt great. So that's something you could do. Compromising though, what's your thoughts on this?
So this is Ramona. I'll go back. It's kind of the same thing. It can be strategically important at times. Sometimes it's like I can compromise on this. This isn't like the be all end all. It's like usually like there's like your walk away. Like what if you don't get is your walk away? At what point will
That's
you
right.
walk away from the
Mhm.
table? And so if it's something that's not your walk away,
Yeah.
and it's something that it's like, yeah, it's not ideal, but I can live with that. And if I give here, then maybe they'll give there. So again,
Mhm.
I can see this happening. Not everyone's super strategic, but if somebody is very sort of strategic in how they're approaching this, I could see it being a valuable tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think
there.
it's an important point. Like, I go back to my example about the 40 minutes versus 20 minutes of speech therapy. I'd be willing to compromise for 30 if really what I care about is that my son gets a one-on-one. Like, if I have a much bigger issue, that a much bigger fish to fry, I actually love to be super flexible and accommodating in these cases. Like, you know what, let's just stick with the 20 for speech, because then I know when they get to my thing, maybe I have. So yes, there's the strategy and some of that comes into it, that you're right, some people are naturally better at than others, or more inclined to. I also really think, we talk about IEPs being data driven, and that decisions should be made by data, and that's a whole other presentation. But compromising to come to a decision is not the same as using data to come to a decision. If we look at that speech therapy minutes example, the way we should be determining how many minutes a person gets in speech therapy is how many minutes they need to meet the goal. And we should be assessing that based on like, well, this quarter they made no progress, so maybe 20 minutes isn't enough and we need to go up to 30. So 30 should be selected based on data, not based on its halfway between 20 and 40, if that makes sense.
This is Sherilyn. Yeah, I was thinking that when you were saying that, Rachel, that it's like, well, would I be willing to compromise if what he needs is,
More? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's 45 minutes. It's like, well, then we're just kind of negotiating.
That's
And
right.
an
That's right.
IEP doesn't feel like it should be, frankly, a negotiation. I
Mhm.
understand what you're saying about strategy. It's about what does the child need to be able to.
That's right. So if I was at a meeting and they started saying, well, you're asking for 40, I'm asking for 20, how about if we just split the difference and call it good? Sometimes you might want to just say, great. But you also would be well within your rights to say, I'm not comfortable making the decision in that way. I want to use data to decide what is the best amount, how many minutes he needs. I think would be maybe another option. Sherilyn, if that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
that idea of using the data. I mean, he may also need the one-on-one. I mean, if that's part of it, but it's all ideally that it's put together in terms of the data, the evaluations, the assessments, and also the kind of like, we're going to revisit this. We're going to revisit this quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Building in some accountability. And Ben says data-driven analysis can be helpful, but tailored to individual needs too. That's right. We're not just this is a person we're talking about. We're not just looking at a set of numbers and, how many opportunities out of 10 did he put his jacket on independently, or all of that. That's true. And an important reminder. But so often let me just say this. There are a lot of ways that decisions seem to be made in IEP meetings, and some are more considered more best practice than others. And it seems like a lot of times decisions are made based on gut feeling, or based on, I've been here forever and this is what I think, or decisions are based on the needs of the staff, or the building the way the building's made or the limitations of the classroom. You know, there's like all these other reasons when that is not how special ed decisions are supposed to be made. But you're right, like we don't want to talk about this person like they're nothing but numbers and data. Okay, last, we have this last option, cooperating and collaborating. So that's the most cooperative, the most assertive, and it's not easy. It involves an attempt to work with the other party to find a solution that fully satisfies both sides. It requires digging into an issue to identify the underlying concerns and needs of both parties and trying to find a solution that meets both sets of concerns. It requires trust and openness and willingness to explain their perspective and listen to other perspectives for increased understanding. This takes time. This is when I come back to my point at the beginning. This is not going to get done in a 30-minute meeting. No way. You could start a conversation like this in a 30-minute meeting, but it's unlikely that that's ever going to be enough time. What else comes to mind when you read this? Has anyone ever been at a meeting where this is happening? I have. I've been at many, to be honest. My own and other people's. It is, you know, I can't remember who said at the beginning about a team that's excited. When I leave an IEP meeting excited, that's when I know this took place. Like when I'm like, oh, we are going to work on some amazing things, or we're going to provide him such innovative and exciting support. Like I have left IEP meetings feeling like that. Not all of them. Yeah, Courtney has had a few meetings like this for your kids, a handful. That's good. I once sat at a meeting, there were literally about 12 of us there, and we were all discussing in detail how to help my son learn to manage his own hygiene in the bathroom. Like how, you know, I want to respect his privacy, but like how to clean up after himself on the toilet. And there was some like OT needs, some sensory needs, there were some speech and language and communication needs. Like there was a lot that needed to, a lot of expertise from a lot of different people was needed for us to devise a plan for how to help him with this. This was when he was a little boy, I should say. But while that is an intimidating experience to sit at a table and talk about your son's private business with all these professionals, that is what, you know, that was a great example of what this can be, where we all bring expertise and we all bring hopefully good intention and good heart. And if we really can take the time and lower our defenses enough to have the conversation, it can be really amazing to watch and be a part of. Anyone else here ever been at a meeting like that? Thank you, Sherilyn. I've heard that before about the bidets, but I can't help but think that we would have like a sprinkler system in our bathroom, basically, that there would just be water spraying everywhere, but we could talk offline about this situation. Yeah. Any other thoughts about cooperating and collaborating? Okay. This just does this all again. Okay. It's important to acknowledge that recognizing and respecting needs builds trust. So when we think about what are the needs of the people in this room, and if we're showing empathy to that or showing consideration of that, I think that really helps build trust. If you're able to demonstrate to the other people of the team, I understand where you're coming from. Like, it's a fact that schools have financial limitations they have to consider. And if I sit there and just like disregard that fact, I think it really harms the trust that could be built, or inhibits the trust, if that makes sense. And the same is true, like as a parent, if I feel like they are just not understanding like the core of who my kid is, or are just not seeing the beauty in our relationship. Like if there are certain things where they just aren't seeing me or seeing what we need, it's impossible to build trust at that point. Ramona, I think this is what you were getting at, that people struggle the most to think rationally when their emotions are the strongest, and people de-escalate when they feel heard and valued. And I think that's something really important for us to keep in mind for ourselves at our own meetings, and also if we are at a meeting with someone who needs to be de-escalated. This is so hard to be at an IEP meeting and stay calm. I saw a meme lately that said schools can't describe themselves as trauma informed if parents leave every IEP meeting feeling like they were kicked in the gut or something along those lines. And it's true. A lot of us leave every IEP meeting feeling like we've been kicked in the gut. And it is such an emotional, it can be a very emotional experience. Maybe especially when they're very little, but I don't even want to make that rule because it could happen at any time. It can feel really emotional, and that we're at that point when we're feeling maybe the most raw, the most vulnerable, the most emotional, supposed to then be collaborative and cooperative is a very high bar. So let's talk about recognizing the real need. Because when we're at a meeting, we might feel like everybody is just against me or everybody's fighting me. And what it might be is that they're just like defending themselves or you know, protecting their own needs and perspectives. That can feel like a challenge to you. So when a school team is sitting at an IEP meeting, here are some things they may be thinking about. Money. We know that a school team cannot say to a parent, he needs such and such service, but we can't afford that. They're not allowed to say that, but they get around it by saying he doesn't need the service at all. There are lots of ways they get around that, but so we know that they use money, or that money is something that they're weighing, and that's a reality. They're not making it up. Like, money is not unlimited, and we know that that's on their mind. We know liability, safety. How do we make sure? We have to make sure that this kid and every other kid and every staff person is safe and in one piece at the end of the day, emotionally and physically. Pride, like for a lot of staff, they've been doing this their whole careers. This is how they identify themselves. This is where they get, you know, their satisfaction and their pride. And if a parent comes in and says you're doing it wrong, or you're doing it badly, or you need to learn a new way, of course pride is going to get in the way. That would for me. A lack of knowledge or skill. I pushed really hard to have Nate included in a general education program for kindergarten through 5th grade. And I received a lot of pushback in that advocacy. And I think in retrospect, one of the reasons is they had no idea how they were going to serve him if they ended up having to, which they did. They didn't have experience working with kids with significant disabilities. They didn't have experience figuring out how to include a significantly disabled person in a general education class. And so at that moment, they were feeling scared, I think, or insecure on their own skill. What else do you think a school might be thinking at that moment of a meeting? I feel really strongly that almost every person who works at a school has a really caring heart and really wants to do right by your kids. So I think that should be on there. They want to do their job well. They want to do well, and they want to do right by your kid. They may disagree how, or they may be stuck with all these other limits, but I think they want to succeed. They want to do right by your kid. Yeah, Courtney says, oh, okay, wait. First, Mano says lack of resources. True. Not only money, but like lack of all the other things they need. That's true. And Courtney says, and why do we still not have the ability to include our kids? Okay, in all fairness, this conversation took place in about 2008. So this has been a while, but yes, I'm sure this is still going on. These conversations are still happening. Courtney says they act like it's a brand new novel idea every time. Yep. Oh, I see your comment. It's still going on. Yeah. Okay. I believe you. Ben says, my parents always pushed for me to be in gen ed the majority of the time, but there was still a certain school in the district that everybody who was disabled on IEPs went to. Yeah. And that is not, that still happens. I mean, so another thing you could add to possible needs is that's just the way we've always done it. I think people get stuck in that a lot. Courtney, it was great to have you. Feel free to look up the recording to get the rest of it. Okay, so then let's shift gears. Let's talk about what is a family thinking about at an IEP meeting. They're thinking about their child's safety, maybe not so much about the safety of everyone else in the building and all the property in the building, but they're certainly very concerned, we know, about the safety. And I want to add that I would say emotional safety as much as physical safety. Like, we're always worried for our kids' safety. We don't want them to get hurt. We don't want them to be beat up or get lost or wander off or all those things. We also want them to feel good while they're at school, like that it's an emotionally safe space where they're valued, where they're appreciated, where it feels like they can be unabashedly themselves. We want to see growth. We want to see improvement. For many of us, not all, but for many of us whose kids have developmental disabilities, the educational growth can be slower than we expected, or it might in certain areas not happen at all. Like, they may not learn certain skills, and that could be a really hard adjustment for a parent to have to come to. But that is something a parent is really thinking hard about at a meeting and what they're wanting to know more about. Social needs. They want to know that their kid has friends. And if their kid doesn't have friends, I guarantee they're very worried about it. That is something that sits on the mind of a lot of parents. They want to know how things are at school versus at home. They also want to talk about why it's so different at school versus home. We all know school does not want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about what goes on at home at all. Or to a very limited extent. And that's really hard for parents, because that is when we see our kids, is when they're home. And that's when everything they learn at school actually, matters to us. Sorry. Just going back to the chat, Mano says, I think gen ed teachers need to be trained on how to have inclusive classes. Absolutely. And what I've heard some parents be successful in getting teachers to have to go to get training, but way more often than that is I hear schools refuse additional training for their staff and say they have already gotten the training they need, or they'll get what they need internally or whatever. And yes, that training needs to start in College School of Education. Couldn't agree more. What else do you think parents are worrying about while they're at school or while they're at a meeting? What are the needs of a family at a meeting? I always found parent meetings with the school frustrating, because there was a lot of data. There was a lot of he got this out of this many opportunities, and he did this and he did that. There's a lot of data, which now that I understand IEPs more, I know that that's a necessary part, and that's how we, do things. But I felt like I really wanted to hear from them about just who my kid was. And I wanted to hear that they got him and they understood him and they thought he was great and that they saw what I thought was great about him. I needed a lot more of that than the data could show me, because at least for my kid, the data often showed that he was struggling, that it wasn't always easy. So the only feedback I would get if we're exploring only data is mediocre. But he's like this amazing person, and I want to hear more about that. So Ben says, couple IDD with blindness and ADHD. It's difficult because other kids bully people. The learning doesn't happen. And then we come home and cry and feel like burdens to everyone else. It takes years to unlearn the bad thoughts about ourselves. Yeah, I totally agree. And that is what parents are sitting at IEP meetings, and the person with the disability are sitting at IEP meetings with the weight of that on their shoulders. And I think, notice that's not on the left. That's not on the list on the left. And that's not an accusation to the school. They care about our kids. They don't want our kids being bullied. I believe that most of the time. They want our kids to like school and feel good about themselves. But I think that all these other things take priority. And then as parents, we could feel like you're so focused on these things, you're forgetting to focus on, you know, the emotional safety or the physical safety of my kid. And yeah, making sure I didn't miss anything in the chat.
So this is Ramona. I have
Yeah.
something to add on to this, especially with this last comment, is a lot of times the school environment, because it's not just, you know, being placed in a particular room, you know, you want to make sure the support is there and all that stuff. But sometimes school environments, the other kids, the other teachers, it's like you need to have this sense of inclusion embedded in the school. And so, and sometimes that means you're really asking some people to change, and that can be very difficult. But that
And
can be
you're sometimes not just
the,
asking people to change, you're asking an entire system to change.
exactly. And so that and so that feeds into both the needs of the school and the needs of the family. But I think that's it. It's like sometimes, especially if you feel that it's not working, then that's a big thing, is coming to that table saying, you know, this environment,
isn't working.
This environment, because sometimes it's not just, I need an extra, you know, half hour of, you know, X thing. Sometimes it's more complicated.
It's much bigger and more sweeping than that. That's true.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the slide and thinking I need a third column that says possible needs of the IEP student. I would have, well, we don't, in the interest of time, I won't get into that, but note that I am going to update the slide for future, because I think that is really important. Let's see, wait, I see, is a pleasure to have in class, but could work harder with more effort and is disruptive in class. Make it make sense. Of course, both can be true, but it's like the onus is on the kid. It's not fair when you're in an unsupportive system. Bye, Sherilyn. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I agree, Ben. So how do we figure out the need of the people sitting at the table with us? Because we know understanding their need is an important component of effective collaboration. So I would say nonverbal communication. Be paying attention, be listening, be showing that you understand. Posture, eye contact, head nodding, a lot of this is kind of ableist and also very like white American culture way of communicating. So take that with a grain of salt, but in whatever way that feels authentic and comfortable to you, demonstrate that you're hearing what's being said to you. Doesn't mean you're agreeing with it, but, you know, acknowledging that you've heard it and that you understand the message, I think can go a long way. Non-verbally, maybe verbally, if that's the best way. Reflecting and reframing, so restating the ideas. So if eye contact and nodding is not your style, another option could be, I hear you say, or I just heard you explain you have a significant concern for his safety. You know, like helping reflect back what you heard them say. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for being here. Mono, it's just you. You're stuck with us. Did I say something that everybody? I'd like to think they just had other things to go, other places to be. And then using intentional questions. Be thoughtful with your questions to help move the conversation forward. Questions like that are accusatory, I would avoid. Questions like, why are you saying that? I've heard sometimes avoid why questions, but like, can you tell me more about where you're coming from? I think can be a great way. Can you explain that to me? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. Can be another great way to learn. And I'll tell you how often I talk to parents that say, I don't understand why they're making this decision. And my answer to them is, well, ask them. Like there should be this ability to have this conversation, to say, I don't understand how you made this decision. Can you explain it to me? That doesn't have to be an accusation or you know, a threat. It really can just come from a place of sincere curiosity. Like, I don't understand. Tell me more. Use intentional open-ended questions to draw out more information, to tease out the need, and to promote understanding, to generate solutions. And it's worth noting, often in conflict resolution, people jump to the solution generation pretty quickly. There's, you know, one person wants 20 minutes, one person wants 40 minutes, they say 30 minutes, and we're done. But that can prevent us, as we learned in the styles of conflict resolution, from having that important conversation and from really figuring out what is the best thing for him, not the easiest solution. Solution generating is great. Like, I love a person who can come up with some great ideas to solve a problem, but we do want to make sure we're not getting there too quickly in lieu of good, authentic and productive conversation. Couple quick things to note: whenever you're communicating with the school, email ordered lists of topics you want to address at least one day before any meeting. Even if it's a meeting they called, you can still send the things you want to make sure are prioritized. If you are going to a meeting with someone, or if you're bringing someone to your meeting, it's always polite to tell the school ahead of time to let them know that you're bringing a guest. I'd be very clear if you're bringing someone that they are not or are a lawyer. The school, if you show up with a lawyer without telling them ahead of time that you are bringing a lawyer, they'll likely just cancel the meeting. So but if you tell them you're bringing an advocate, you want to be clear with them that that is not a lawyer, if that's the case. I also wish I had included on this slide, everything should be in writing when you're communicating with the team. I always like to just do a little reminder for that. And then one last thing I want to talk about is interpreters. For people who English is not their primary language, you have a right to request an interpreter for all school meetings. And I would ask for it with as much notice as you can, you know, as soon as possible. You're not required to have an interpreter. The interpreter is there for your convenience and your understanding. Sometimes the school will ask you to have an interpreter, but you're not required to unless you want to. And I would encourage you to reschedule if no skilled interpreter shows up to the meeting. I've seen it happen. You know, if you have neurotypical kids who you want to ask to be interpreters, I discourage that, although I know a lot of families do it. We all do what we have to do, but rely on the school to provide a professional whenever you can. Okay, and with that, we are at the end, and I would open this up to this big crowd with questions.
So this is Ramona, and I'm kind of curious now, where do we see crying show up?
I'm so glad you brought that, but you remembered that. Let's go all the way back.
Let's go back and
Yeah.
look at where we can see all the 5 styles. You know, because it was kind of funny. I was thinking, like, if you're avoiding, you're probably not going to cry because that would be displaying emotion. And
Yeah, you would
gonna,
cry later.
Yeah, you're going to keep your head low. Yeah.
That's right. But I would think with avoiding, it comes out later. Maybe at the meeting you're fine, but that frustration or upsetness doesn't just dissipate.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's like, and I'm thinking, well, is crying an assertive or an unassertive? Or I kind of think crying is a little bit of an assertive thing. But I don't know. I'm curious. What do you think? I mean, and you have different tears. Question. You have tears of gratitude. You have tears of frustration.
Tears of manipulation.
Yeah. So I kind of see it maybe showing up in the back and forth. But
I think if your crying is under control but is authentic, and it's part of a productive conversation, to me that is that collaborating thing. Genuine emotion showing up is not anti this approach.
Yeah, I mean, you always hear that behavior is communication, and this is a type of behavior, and
that's right.
It's a type of communication.
Yeah. So I think another question is, where does anger show up? because like, yeah,
Probably not on the cooperative side.
I don't know. Like, again, if you're not being nasty, if you're not losing control, if you're just experiencing sincere anger and expressing it in a non-dangerous way, then again, it may just be part of being honest and collaborating and cooperating.
Yeah, I guess actually you put it that way. It could be something of collaboration or possibly even harmonizing, is like naming it. Like sometimes that's a big part of a conversation.
Yeah, like I'm
or an
feeling really angry
exchange.
by this situation right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Again, it gets back to that communication. It's a behavior, but the behavior is communication, which all seem to be the three, but not the avoid.
All but the avoiding.
All but the avoiding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's communication too. If you're sitting like this
That's
and you're
true.
refusing eye contact and you're, almost refusing to engage in a conversation, that's saying something.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that. Thank you for bringing that back up. Any other questions? Or Mano, do you have any comments or questions?
Oh, I mean, this was a good presentation. I guess, because I was looking through some of the comments and you're talking about some of the anger issues that happens. So, I mean, with my experience, the way we have dealt was me and my husband, we form a team where if I get too emotional, it's when he takes over and he uses his managerial headset and he starts like, it's like he uses his tech hat and he starts reducing that, that de-escalating the issue, the situation, and he puts it in a way that nobody's angry, but they're just trying to resolve the issue or everybody working together to figure out a better optimal way to move forward. That's what we have worked like. It happened once, and then from moving forward, I felt like maybe we should work together, and we kept doing that. So whenever we have situations like this,
smart. Is that your spouse? Is that what you were saying? That's your spouse?
Yes. Yep.
I love that. And it's worth noting, it doesn't have to be a spouse. It could be anyone. And that, the ARC does that. We go to meetings with people for exactly that reason, or we help parent volunteers. We find parent volunteers to go for exactly that reason, because it makes a huge difference. And when I go with a parent, I like to say, like, especially if they're a parent who has told me they have a fear of losing control of themselves during the meeting, that I like that, like, what do you want me to do when you get like that? Do you want me to stop you, or do you want me to let you go? Because I don't want to jump in the front of an angry tiger, but like, I also, if you want me to put a hand on you and be, encourage you to take a break for a minute, I can do that. And I'm glad you said that. We shouldn't have to sit at those meetings alone.
Right. Yep. Definitely not alone. Yeah.
Before you go, please take a moment to let us know what you thought of today's presentation. Ramona, are you going to put that in the chat? Wait, you're muted.
Is it possible for you to put it in the chat?
Yes.
I just realized I don't have it handy.
I can do it.
Yeah.
I have to stop sharing, but that is not a problem. Here we go. If you could take a second to take our survey, it tells us how we did, and it also tells our funders how we did, and helps us get additional funding to continue to do this kind of work. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm still sharing, aren't I? There we go.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay.
All right.